Welcome to the New York State Bar Association's House of Delegates meeting. Before we begin, just a few quick reminders for our delegates who are participating remotely. Be sure to check that your full name appears as it is supposed to in your profile. If called upon, all comments will be limited to 3 minutes. If you are attending the meeting virtually, please note that you will be muted during the meeting. If you wish to speak, please use the raise hand feature. Use the raise hand feature to advance and second a motion to approve a report or to indicate that you wish to speak. When voting, a poll box will appear on your screen. Please identify your vote at that time. For those of you here in person, you will be asked to indicate your vote by a show of hands. If you abstain from a vote, you must send a separate email to the New York State Bar Association so she can document your abstention accordingly. Chat feature will be disabled for this meeting and for future House of Delegates meetings. Motions made from the floor during the meeting must be typed out using the Q&A feature. As previously mentioned, be sure to use the raise hand feature to advance and second a motion. If you are attending virtually and are chosen to speak, remember to turn on your camera and unmute yourself. We cannot guarantee that every person wishing to speak will have the opportunity to do so. We thank you for your patience and understanding. Thank you for listening. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the meeting.
Did I do it? Okay. And if you'd all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you and welcome. It's nice to be here at our home, and hopefully everyone is having a delightful reunion here with your friends and fellow members. There was just a video that talked a little bit about the procedures. I'll renew what it said briefly, and that is if you are here, we're going to ask you to please use the microphones. Please address the chair. Please don't address the person who's made the motion or anyone else. We're going to limit you to 3 minutes to speak. We're going to ask you to speak only once. So with that, our hope is that we can have an orderly meeting and we can move along and complete this meeting expeditiously. So the first order of business is the approval of the minutes of January 20th, 2023. Are there any amendments, changes, concerns? Seeing none, they are approved. Our next order of business is the treasurer's report, and Domenick Napoletano will make his final report as treasurer.
Now it's on. Yes. There you go. Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Traditionally, this report, which is given in April, is not a very long one. But since everyone doesn't want to leave, I promise to keep you here as long as I possibly can. The reason why it's traditionally not a long report is because the fiscal year has basically just started. So if we can please turn to the first slide, we can get started. As you can see from the slide, which is on the screen, membership dues were down $85,000 as of the end of February of this year, compared to February of last year. That number represents approximately 309 paid members. The number may seem insignificant based on the total budget projections, but the decline and staff, the decline in membership is something that the membership committee will address later on this morning. Section program revenue is on an increase, primarily because of sponsorships and cash that was collected from section meetings and for meeting luncheons at the Hilton this past January. That increase is approximately $404,300 over that which it was in 2022. Next slide, please. CLE revenue, as you can see, is also increased by approximately $111,000. Kudos again, as I've been giving kudos to Kathy Sikorsky and her staff consistently throughout the many years that we've been doing this. Slide 3, please. The annual revenue income is up by $424,000. This is due in large part to the in-person registration fees, which increased by $272,000, and the gala revenue of approximately $198,000. Slide 4, please. Total revenue increase, as you can see from this slide, is $804,000. This would normally be something to be excited about. However, as the world opened and we began to travel, we meaning the association began to travel, and we began to hold live programs, expenses increased significantly and exceeded the expenses compared to last year by a very significant amount, as you can likewise see by that slide. Slide 5, please. On the expense side, big increase is from our annual meeting. Section expenses increased by $272,000. That would mostly be due to off-site dinners and events at the annual meeting, approximately $35,000 for the gala sponsorship. Total direct annual income expenses increased by $1,424,000. Now that is not an insignificant number. The Hilton cost expenses were approximately $1,123,000. Again, not a small number. And the gala expenses were $203,000. The Hilton costs will be distributed among the sections and committees in March, as was explained at the executive committee meeting, which I will not go into any great detail today because it is a tad complicated and well beyond my expertise. That's an admission. All other expenses are pretty much in line with what has been occurring for the last year. Slide 6, please. Total expenses, as you can see, is a very significant number of $1,589,000, which nonetheless gave us a surplus decrease by $785,000. Now, that's my report, but now I would like to take a moment of personal privilege. Over these last 4 years, I have been honored, and I mean that sincerely, to have appeared before this body and to have presented my reports both to the House and to the Executive Committee. And when I say that I was honored to do this, I mean that quite sincerely, because it is an honor to serve this association. But it wasn't something that I did all on my own. I had great help, and I want to acknowledge the help that I received. I want to thank Chris O'Brien, Amir, who is invaluable to the finance department. I want to thank Pam McDivitt, our executive director, who has been by my side for the last 4 years, and I trust will continue to be there as I'm told that I'm going to be moving on to the end of this row to where Dick sits now. But as I said, it's been an honor and a privilege for me to have served you. I hope that you have sometimes enjoyed my reports, especially the ones that I gave at the beginning, on some of the skits of Abbott Costello, which I have to thank my dear friend who's going to remain anonymous. Now I'm going to name it. Michael Fox was a great help in having me do those skits. But least I leave without doing one. I'm going to sit now. I'm going to ask Patrick to please run the last skit. Patrick, if you don't mind.
So I want to give my personal thanks to Domenick. He's been incredible over these past 4 years. He's been dedicated to this bar. He's worked endlessly to try to keep us in order, and we owe him a great debt of gratitude. And in addition to that, he's now moving this portfolio over to Susan Harper, and I'm sure that that transfer will be seamless. So it is really my pleasure for our next order of business to call upon Presiding Justice Elizabeth Garry, who will address us. And Justice Garry has been involved in every aspect of law. She's been in private practice. She's been a town justice, which we've talked about. She's been on town planning boards. She's been a confidential law clerk. Since her graduation from Albany Law School, she's done pretty much everything there is to do. Justice Garry's been on the Supreme Court from Shenango County since 2006. And by the way, she served on our Rural Justice Task Force and was invaluable in her insights there. She's been on the Third Department since 2009 and has been the presiding justice of the Third since 2018. And now I could go on and talk about all of her committees and all of her awards, but what's really important here is what she does every day. She is a fabulous administrator. She is a conscientious judge. And so it's really, and by the way, she's a great friend of this organization. So it's my real pleasure to introduce my PJ, Justice Garry.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. I've said some hellos as I entered the room. It is such a pleasure and an honor to meet with this remarkable body this morning. Thank you to Mr. Lewis for the invitation to address you. I will keep it brief, but I am grateful for the chance to come and speak with you this morning. There's been a lot that's happened since Mr. Lewis reached out with this invitation, as I think many of you know, and it's hard to believe, frankly, that it's just been 1 week, a week and a day since that announcement came out, because there's a lot happening with that. But this invitation preceded that, and I wasn't asked to speak about all of that, but I probably will speak with some of you a couple of days from now. I was asked to speak about the Third Department, which it is my honor and privilege to serve through these years, 14 years. I've been a member of that court. The first thing I want to say, each of, and many of you know, each of the appellate divisions is charged with the responsibility of overseeing attorney admissions. But one of the ways that the Third Department is unique is that we are also responsible for overseeing the admission of new attorneys, not just from our jurisdiction, but admitting all attorneys from other states and internationally as well. And consequently, the Third Department has the greatest number of new admissions in the state, roughly 3,600 each year. And at every ceremony, what I want you to know, they're one of the fun things we get to do, of course. At every ceremony, we offer each and every new lawyer this advice. Always keep in mind that we in the judiciary and you in the bar are partners in our system of justice, each dependent upon the other, each indispensable to each other in the fulfillment of our common purpose to see that justice is done. I call it advice. It could easily be called a request. And I make that request here in my opening remarks to you. It is absolutely essential that we work together to meet our shared goals. not just in our courtrooms across the state, obviously there too, but perhaps even more importantly, when it comes to matters of policy. This organization in particular plays such a central, and I'm hearing a little feedback. Is it me being too close to the mic, or? Thank you, Mr. Lewis, okay. This organization in particular plays such a central and important role in that collaborative partnership. I'm tremendously grateful for the privilege of serving as a judge, but be mindful that those of us on the bench do give up our ability to fully participate in many dialogues and certain types of advocacy, even sometimes when it comes to our own defense or the defense of our colleagues. And even where we are able to speak and advocate, we don't always have the tools or the latitude to leverage that advocacy and get results. So we're grateful for the organized bar and your efforts, your careful attention to the issues of the day, and the work you do to uphold, improve the law, uphold the honor and dignity of the legal profession and our justice system. Thank you for all you do. It's a Saturday morning. Here you all are. Thank you. You also gather and provide us with critical perspective about the realities of practice on the ground. I come from my own history, as Mr. Lewis said. I was a practicing lawyer, but the years go on. We need that perspective as we're fashioning our policy. As a member of the administrative board, where I'm serving now in my 6th year, I am always thankful for the input of the Bar Association and upon the issues that we're considering. And the context and the input that you provide is invaluable. I know, and let me assure you, that I am not alone in that. As you probably know, and I think the map went up, because I never like to talk geography without the map, and this map is so pretty. It's, all those various colors. So some of you may know that, but as you know, the 3rd Department is located here in Albany. Although we have auxiliary operations, including operation of the Mental Hygiene Legal Service, which has offices throughout our jurisdiction. We cover 28 counties, the 3rd, 4th, and 6th judicial districts that you see on that map. And that extends, of course, as you see, from the Canadian border to the lower Catskills, and from Vermont and Massachusetts over to through the Finger Lakes in the west. We hear a wide variety of civil and criminal cases. We also have unique jurisdiction to hear unemployment insurance and workers' compensation. And due to our location in Albany, we also hear a large proportion of Article 78 cases involving the state agencies. For those of you who don't practice regularly in the 3rd Department, what I want you to know is that we have a strong commitment to serving the public. When litigants or attorneys have questions, the public-facing staff in the 3rd Department you will find them to be deeply dedicated to helping people find answers. How do I do this? How can I help you is the question you will hear from the members of my staff. And we are understandably proud of that tradition. If there's one thing that we've all experienced recently, if there's one thing that the pandemic brought upon us, it was a steep increase in our facility and use of technology, and we all know that. But along these lines, what I want to tell you about that's happening right now at the 3rd Department, and this is behind the scenes, the public won't see it, but I think will benefit from it. And we are undergoing a significant, long-awaited upgrade to our content management system, to our database and the way that we interact with our case management. We hope that this will expedite the work that we do, and the other thing that will make it make our court more user-friendly is that we're redesigning our court website. For the first time, this is almost embarrassing, for the first time since it was initially built 20 years ago. So we're undertaking, I recognize, and my staff recognizes, the need to bring us into at least the present, if not the future. And so we're in the process of upgrading our tech significantly. We are looking to modernize the design and the functionality. And more importantly, I think, to the bar, we are launching a pilot program to digitize and e-file transcripts in criminal appeals. And this will involve having the court reporters upload the transcripts directly to NICEF to reduce the hard copies and eliminate the appendices in criminal matters, with an aim of saving counsel and litigants both time and money. All of this, frankly, is occurring against a backdrop of some upheaval, and you are probably experiencing this in your practices. Like other courts and court organizations, we at the Third Department have had unprecedented employee turnover during and following the pandemic. About a quarter of our staff has been hired in the 2 years since the court hiring freeze was lifted. That's extraordinary. We're a great employer, and traditionally people would come and spend their whole career with our court. Our clerk, for instance, has been there, the clerk of the Third Department has been there 45 years. That's in different capacities. But we are experiencing a lot of turnover. We're seeing that. It's been challenging, but throughout what I want to tell you, and I'm happy about this, throughout all of that, the staff we have not faltered in their dedication to the public service that we provide. Unlike so many other organizations in the public and private sectors, we have been operating fully in person since the spring of '21. There's no doubt, in my view, that physical presence is important, but the model, as you are also probably experiencing, does pose challenges. I know that many of you in your practices or the organizations where you work, or possibly here even in state bar operations, may have been also navigating these changes. And some of you were, I'm sure, involved in the court system's pandemic practices working group study. I look forward to the ongoing dialogue about how best practices in regard to specifically, remote appearances and remote workforce adjustments continue to evolve. I'm going to return to where I started. As we all find our way through these challenges, these are the times when that partnership between the bench and the bar is most critical. We must, and we will, work together to ensure that the essential fabric of our society is developed and enhanced rather than too deeply frayed or torn apart. So, I thank you again for your many contributions, for your ongoing work, and for inviting me to speak with you here today. I don't know. Thank you. Remind me, am I taking any questions? I don't know. Okay, good. All right, good.
But if anyone would like to ask the judge any questions.
Nothing that you're going to ask me next Tuesday, though. So, anything about the Third Department or our operations or the future of the court? Okay. Yes. Yes, yes, thank you, Mr. Kelly. It's, I do. It's an intangible, but but we are getting more requests for remote appearances. We are allowing those. The current model that we're functioning with is informally a good cause standard, you know. So lawyers will write to us and say, I can't make it to court for this reason or that reason, and we have the facility to allow remote appearances. Out in the Fourth Department, PJ Whalen is doing a pilot project where he's allowing lawyers to just choose remote or in person, and I'm watching that with interest. You know, I'll be curious to see how because he and I have, you know, similar in terms of that jurisdiction and so on. So I'm waiting to see how those results come in. We have not chosen to embark on that path. We do find a great value to in-person appearances, but so right now we're doing a little of each, with the majority being in person.
I'm going to have to cut off.
Okay, sorry.
No, that's okay, Judge.
I could go on about that, obviously, so thank you.
Thank you so much. It was great to see you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Just to be clear, when Justice Garry says that if you have a question or you need to reach her, she responds, and she's been such an asset to this area with regard to her service. I can't tell you what a good friend she is to our association. She's up on the issues. She follows what we do. And it's wonderful to deal with a judge who is as committed to our profession as she is. In any event, the next thing on our agenda is a report from our president, Shelley Wallach.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Oh, I love that. See, everybody is happy to be here in the Bar Center. Well, welcome again. And I want to start with some thank yous. I want to start with thank yous to our absolutely incredible staff that has made this meeting and last night's dinner possible. I want to thank Chuck and Garry who for all their work putting together and turning over this bar center from last night's festivities to look like it is this morning. I know they were here until late hours into the evening last night, so thank you. I want to thank Pam McDevitt, our executive director, for all the work that she has done in supporting the association, running our wonderful staff and association, and also supporting me through my presidency. I want to thank Jessica and Tom, who are running our house meetings, and Melissa O'Clair, who you saw in the front, as well as our associate executive director and director of CLE, Kathy Zahusky, for all the work that they have put in to making our meetings possible. And I want to thank all of the staff, quite frankly, because we have an incredible number of staff members who you don't see working so hard behind the scenes. So thank you. And while I'm on thank yous, although oftentimes people leave this to the end of their report, I want to thank my fellow officers for their incredible support this past year. Dick Lewis, President-elect, Domenick Napoletano, our treasurer, and Taya Gray is our secretary. Thank you so much. You've been a wonderful team to work with through the year, so thank you. So we are one of the world's most prominent legal associations. The New York State Bar Association wields significant influence around the country, around the state, and around the world. And we work very hard every day to defend the rule of law, protect those who are most vulnerable in our societies, and to create a more equitable society. As bar leaders, we must do everything we can to ensure justice, equity, inclusion, and equality within our profession. This year has been filled with wonderful accomplishments, many challenges, and many new opportunities, which we have embraced. Many of them alter the path of our profession and are altering the path of our profession as we move forward into the future. In times like these, the rule of law often comes under attack, both at home and abroad, and this time is no exception. The uncertainty that we are facing, including the economic upheaval, the deepening of political and socioeconomic divides, and the war in Ukraine, coupled with the rapid changes and developments in technology and the metaverse, create these challenges, but also many, many opportunities for us. And it has been an opportunity for us to speak out and be a part of that challenge globally. We are uniquely positioned in the legal community that impacts the nation here in New York. People globally around the world look to us. They want to know what New York is doing, what New York is saying, and what New York thinks. So we have influences not only around the country, around the world, and around our state. We are a global organization. And during my presidency, to that end, we've signed a number of memoranda of understandings, 10 to be exact, with various bar groups, including the Bar Association of Puerto Rico, the Bar Council of England and Wales, the Law Society of England and Wales, the Law Society of Scotland, the Global Accountability Network, the Polish Bar Council, the Warsaw Bar Association, the National Bar of Legal Advisors in Warsaw, and the US Virgin Islands. And when you think about all of those different places and see how worldly they are, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, US territories, you can see what I'm talking about. But our association has also taken on the forefront of the issues of the day. After the Dobbs decision came down, our association worked very strong through its Women in the Law section to protect women's reproductive rights and access to health care, as well as to support the amendments to the ERA. And the section continues to be a leader in these areas. Additionally, we took over ownership of our building, our home here on Elk Street. And as you're about to see up on the screen, we do intend to make it better. And we are in the position to start to make it better. We have a vision for the future that will make our building not only ADA compliant, which is necessary for everybody to have easy access to the building, but also to upgrade all of our systems, everything in the building that needs attention, to make it better for our staff and better for us. And so to that end, when I talk throughout this year about using our bar center, I encourage you to. As we can see from this weekend, it is our home, and it is a wonderful home. We are looking into the idea of creating a historical 501(c)(3) to protect our building and allow us to support our building through donations to help with these upgrades and these changes. We will have more about that in the coming months. And we've also changed the trajectory of our member numbers. We have exhaustive studies on how to best develop membership within our association, and we're willing to explore new ideas, such as subscription models and changing in our dues structure. We have launched a law firm enterprise model where we encourage law firms to join as their firms and providing them with CLE support, as well as all of the resources of membership for all of their law firm members. And we have explored ideas, and we have a pilot right now with bar association, organizational membership to support the bar associations around the world that would benefit from some of our resources. In particular, one that I've been approached many times with is attorney well-being. We have an outstanding attorney well-being committee and program, as well as a lawyer assistance program that many bar associations do not have the opportunity to have or have not fully developed yet. And to that end, we are entered into a membership with the Virgin Islands Bar Association, that all 1,200 of their members will become members of our association and will be able to avail themselves of a limited membership to access our attorney well-being resources, as well as our trial advocacy teachings, which is something that they are looking for and have asked for support with. And also for us to then support them in developing their own LAP program in the Virgin Islands, where attorney well-being is a great challenge. Our international section has added its Ukrainian chapter, and they have worked very hard with the members of the Ukrainian Bar Association and the Polish Bar Associations and our association to provide support to Ukrainian lawyers and communities through our pro bono work and assistance. And we have passed resolutions to urge the UN's General Assembly to develop a war crimes tribunal that will hear the war crime of aggression. And this is something that we received support from the American Bar Association, and was one of the issues we brought to the American Bar Association, and their international section joined us in. So we have continued our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Our work on the US territories and equal rights for all people continues with programming that we're now developing in conjunction with the American Bar Association, as well as the New York City Bar Association, and around the world and our country. And by the way, when I say around the world, you probably are wondering, why do people around the world care about these issues? But they do. Why? Because they are issues that support diversity, equity, and inclusion. And they want to see us as a society, an association, helping to support those issues. It gives us a global vision. We have also partnered with the Puerto Rico Bar Association, and we are working with the Guam Bar Association, and believe we will be signing a memorandum of understanding with them in the coming months. So our work to overturn the insular cases continues. It is strong, it is important. And while I should say the Supreme Court did not accept the case of Fitzimanu for certiorari and hear that case, we continue our fight to hope through legislative efforts that these issues will be addressed, and that the second-class citizenship that still exists for people living in the territories will change. In November, our House of Delegates approved these many resolutions, and a resolution for the US territories, which we also brought to the American Bar Association, and it was adopted. And so now they have joined in our fight. Just this week, I was at ABA Lobby Day earlier this week with our president-elect, Dick Lewis, and our wonderful government relations team, Hillary Jockmans and Cheyenne Burke joined us. And while we walked the halls of Congress and met with our various legislatures, this issue was at the forefront, the issue of the rights for people of the US territories. And we've learned that HR 279, which is a legislative effort to overturn the insular cases, or denounce the insular cases, I should say, because they can't overturn it, but denounce the insular cases and the territories clause is going to be reintroduced into Congress in the coming weeks. And we support that, and so does the American Bar Association. Also at the forefront of our legislative efforts in Washington, D.C. were discussions about the metaverse and Web3 and the regulatory schemes there. Also, in our discussions, we talked about funding for legal services. We talked about representation in immigration proceedings. We spoke about equal rights. We spoke about the laws that need to be put into place that our association supports regarding gun violence and mass shootings and assault rifles, which we passed through our task force's report. And it was a very fruitful endeavor in those regards. We've also launched a task force on mental health and trauma-informed representation. And for those of you who attended the annual meeting, know it was the topic of the presidential summit. And we'll be hearing later from that task force. This is amazing, the work that they have done and that they continue to do. And while I know that their report, which is coming to you in June, is going to be quite extensive, I encourage you all to read it and embrace it, because it's the changes that we need to address the mental health crisis that has become so prominent in our society and in our legal community. We now have a 24/7 hotline for attorneys in need of support, and our Committee on Attorney Wellbeing has developed programming to support our members on the importance of self-care. Our leadership on attorney well-being, as I mentioned, has been recognized around the globe. And we have filed a lawsuit, as I believe you all know, for the increase of assigned counsel rates around New York State to $164 an hour for assigned counsel attorneys. And it is our position that that increase should be funded by the state. We know that it is in part of the budget discussions and in the various bills that are being presented in the coming days. And we hope that finally assigned counsel will be given the raise that they so rightfully deserve. And ultimately, that will help support access to justice in our communities and in those individuals who are marginalized and indigent. We have continued our efforts on question 26. And we've made some progress, as you may have heard. There are some changes being made to question 26. They will be removing the requirement to report traffic infractions and family court matters. However, we continue to push for the complete removal of question 26 from the bar admission. And we continue our work with the law schools to also remove this question from their admissions requirements. We supported the work of the 9th Judicial District's OCA Access to Justice Commission that created the LGBTQ plus bench card. That was adopted by our LGBTQ plus people in the law section with a report that was brought here to this House of Delegates, and then we brought to the ABA. And now, nationally, the courts across our country have adopted the resolution to adopt LGBTQ plus bench cards, and they are working on that. What an incredible success for diversity, equity, and inclusion in our courts and in our system of justice. We continue to protect the legal profession in many ways and to keep its members informed of legal, economic, and policy developments which affect the practice of law. The Executive Committee has launched a working group on the facial recognition technology and access to legal representation that is being headed by Domenick Napoletano, our treasurer and president-elect designee. In the wake of our state's struggle to confirm its next chief judge, I have formed a special committee to evaluate the selection process for the Court of Appeals, co-chaired by past President Vincent Doyle and a member of this House, and Damaris Hernandez from Cravath. And after the governor signed into law the new notary public requirements without consulting us, we immediately developed CLE programming that was attended by over 800 people and discussed the changes, what needs to be made. But more importantly, we established a committee to address the issues that these new notary requirements present to the practice of law. And that is being chaired by our president-elect, Dick Lewis. And thank you, and co-chaired by Ellen Makovsky. Thank you. The New York State Bar Association, as I mentioned, has been on the floor of the House of the American Bar Association, both at its annual and mid-year meetings. We bring resolutions, we co-sponsor resolutions, and speak in support of resolutions. And in addition to the ones that I've already mentioned, we've supported the ABA's reaffirmation of its commitment to law that prohibits lawyers from sharing legal fees and non-lawyer ownership, Resolution 402. And I've been actively involved, as has our president-elect, with the other bar associations around this nation that support that. We also supported Resolution 601, which urged the federal, state, and local and tribal governments to enact laws to give police reasonable time to complete background checks. And at the mid-year meeting, we supported Resolution 501, adopting 10 principles to address the goal of gender equity among employers, institutions, and people who are part of the criminal justice system, as well as Resolution 603, which urges the federal, state, and local and territorial and tribal governments to enact statute, rules, and regulations that would make it lawful for persons other than law enforcement to possess firearms on property owned, operated, or controlled by any public or private institution of higher education. And in the states that do not make it unlawful for any person other than law enforcement to possess firearms on property owned and operated or controlled by a public institution or higher education, authorize such institutions of higher education to restrict or regulate the concealed or open carry of firearms on their campuses. And the other thing that we have done to advance our international footprint has been through the work of the Task Force on Emerging Digital Finance and Currency, which all of you have heard me speak about repeatedly. Our task force has worked hard to educate our legal community in New York, in the nation, and the world about these new technologies. The New York State Bar Association is on the forefront of the discussions regarding regulations and ethical considerations within this quickly evolving frontier. Web3's impact on the practice of law and the metaverse is something that we need to focus on, and we need to be a part of the conversation. The New York State Bar Association is also exploring ways in which we as a bar association can embrace this new technology and provide benefits to our members. Earlier this year, I also presented to the University of Florence, Italy, on the work of the New York State Bar Association's Task Force on Emerging Digital Finance and Currency in this space. And I was asked, and now I'm serving on the advisory board to NYU's SPS Metaverse Collaborative. To that end, and showing our joint work with not only New York University, but the organizations that we've signed memorandums of understanding with, we are putting on a deep dive into the metaverse, into Web3 and the metaverse program, an international conference at the end of April. There's a booklet, I believe, out at registration about the program, and I encourage you all to attend. Whether you come to New York in person and take the opportunities to engage with this incredible lineup of speakers and people from around the world, as well as enjoy the networking opportunities it will present. If you can't make it, then join online. I encourage the members of this House to watch the live stream and learn more about this quickly evolving area. And we have partnered, as you can see, with the Law Society of England and Wales and the Bar Council of England and Wales and the Barcelona Bar Association and the International Bar Association, the UIA, Association of Bar Leaders, on this program. And nationally, the California Lawyers Association has also partnered with us. It will be an outstanding symposium, and I encourage you all to attend. So, recognizing that these technologies are here to stay, we must continue to learn about them and test their abilities and limitations. And I'm driving Jessica crazy with the slides, but we're going to go back to the ChatGPT. Because to that end, I decided to ask ChatGPT, the artificial intelligence program, what it believed its limitations were in legal representation. After all, for those of you who saw the president's brief or the article just a few days ago, Goldman Sachs believes that 43% of all, I think it's 43%, 44% of all legal services will be taken over by AI. So, what does AI think about that? Well, here's what the ChatGPT said. 1, AI cannot provide the human touch and empathy that is essential for legal representation. 2, AI cannot provide creative solutions to legal problems. 3, AI is not able to process large amounts of data and parse out the relevant portions. This issue also may impact the data's quality. And finally, AI cannot provide ethical judgment. So, members of this House of Delegates, I think that the law profession, at least for a while longer, is safe. So, as we talk about where we've been and what we've done this year, and that we've been positioned to forge change globally, nationally, and here in New York, I hearken back to the motto of my presidency when I took over: investing in the future of our profession. And I would suggest that's exactly what we're doing. And I urge this House of Delegates and this profession to continue to do that, to make our profession even better and more global, because we are now. We are global. With the technologies that I just discussed, with the virtual option that we're even engaging in here today, we are global. We are no longer just in New York. We have attorneys practicing who are all over the state and the world. And we need to be sure that we are engaged with the global legal community on a continued basis. So our association has remained strong despite the challenges that this year has presented. We anxiously await the completion of the selection process of our chief judge and the restoration of our Court of Appeals to a full bench. While these have been challenging times, we must remember that adversity makes us stronger. We must continue to unite our profession and remember the oath that we took when we became lawyers and judges. Remember that the mission of our association ends with the goal to do the public good. Our association is at its best when it uses its collective voice to lead, influence, and inspire. We learn from each other by exposing ourselves to new approaches toward resolutions. We possess a robust voice that is heard because of our influence, prestige, geographic position, and worldwide membership and partnership. Throughout my presidency, we have confronted numerous issues that have demanded the attention of the bench and the bar of the Empire State. As leaders and members of the greatest bar association in the nation, we should be proud of our work and what we have accomplished. We must and we will continue to forge a path forward and express our voice to impact change on the issues affecting the profession, the association, and the rule of law. I thank you all for all of your support and your hard work, and I look forward to continuing to work with you.
So Sherry, I guess with that kind of a resounding applause, we don't have to say thank you again, but I want to say thank you. You've been energetic, committed, passionate, and you certainly have, well, I keep making shoe references when I talk to you, but you're big shoes to fill. So thank you for all you've done. So our next item of business is the presentation of the 2023 Ruth Bader Ginsburg Memorial Scholarship Award. In November of 2020, the association's executive committee approved the creation of the scholarship award to be presented annually to a law student who, through written submission, research project, or an exemplary internship, externship, or pro bono service demonstrates character consistent with and honoring the legacy of the late, great Supreme Court Associate Justice and native of New York. The presentation will be made by President Shelley Wallach.
Well, good morning again, everybody. So it is my distinct pleasure, and I believe Ms. Wu is going to be joining us virtually. Hello. Good morning, Ms. Wu.
Good morning.
So I am thrilled to introduce this year's Ruth Bader Ginsburg Scholarship winner, who is an exceptional law student and tireless advocate for women and children. In her application letter, Shelley Wu described herself as a proud daughter of working-class parents who emigrated from rural China. They arrived in Brooklyn with nothing but a suitcase and some family photos. During her childhood, Shelley was instrumental in helping the family navigate language and cultural barriers as they acclimated to life in America. Those early experiences forever shaped a strong sense of justice and a commitment to helping those who face discrimination. Shelley attended Fordham University and spent time working as a community liaison for New York State. Senator on Long Island, she also graduated with her bachelor's degree early from Fordham University and spent time as a paralegal helping the Child Abuse and Domestic Violence Unit at the New York County District Attorney's Office. Her work with attorneys there inspired her to apply for law school with the goal of advocating for women's rights and gender equality. See, I can't stop saying global. She ranks in the top 10% of her class at Cardozo School of Law, and she serves on the law review there and commits her time to several legal clinics. Shelley is not afraid to get into the thick of things and do tough emotional work of fighting for victims. Her clinical work spans issues from gaining orders of protection to disability rights and helping inmates prepare for the parole board. Her nomination letter that accompanied her application were filled with examples of Shelley's grit, determination, compassion, and empathy. Cardozo Law School Dean Melanie Leslie praised Shelley's work both on campus and off, saying she has cultivated a service-oriented mindset and committed to advancing women's rights. Following graduation, Shelley plans to clerk for Judge Greta Gooden Brown in the New Jersey Superior Court, Appellate Division, and then pursue a career in civil rights law and public service. The Ruth Bader Ginsburg Scholarship was established in 2020 to recognize our best and brightest law students whose work embodies the values and career of Justice Ginsburg. Shelley Wu is the epitome of this mission. It gives me great pleasure to present you, Shelley, with the 2023 Ruth Bader Ginsburg Scholarship Award.
Hi, and thank you so much for this incredible honor. I apologize that I'm not able to attend in person, but I'm so incredibly honored to even be mentioned in the same sentence as Justice Ginsburg. When I was in college, Justice Ginsburg came to speak on campus, and of course the event space was filled to capacity. So I watched her speak through the live broadcast on TV outside, much like what you guys are doing now. And I remember just being so incredibly in awe of her strength, resilience, and her fierce determination to advance women's rights. I'm the first woman in my family to go to college, and 2 months from now, I think less than 2 months from now, I'll be the first in my family to earn a postgraduate degree. And so I hope to honor Justice Ginsburg's legacy and strive to make the legal profession more equitable, and inclusive. Thank you so much.
We're all very proud of you and hope that you'll be sitting here in just a few years, because we need people with your talent.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So the next item of business is the election of the 2023-2024 Nominating Committee and the Association's delegates to the ABA House of Delegates. And that report will be given by past President Henry M. Greenberg, Chair of the Nominating Committee. Hank? Hank, you're muted.
How's this? Good? Can you hear me, Mr. Chairman? Great. Well, thank you for the introduction. On behalf of the Nominating Committee, I submit nominations for district representatives on the Nominating Committee for the 2023 to 2024 term, plus alternate members. They are as follows: Chai Jandra Sehar, Vincent Ted Chang, Lisa M. Stenson Desamores, Margaret J. Finnerty, Stephen Charles Lassard, Seth Rosner, J. G. Safer, Diana S. Sen, Richard P. Swanson, Mira C. Weiss, first alternate, Mark Griffin, second alternate, David Cohn, third alternate. From the second district, the Honorable Cheryl Chambers, Amy Richter, the Honorable Joanne D. Quinones, alternate. Third district, Elena DeFeo Kane, Matthew J. Kelly, Matthew Greismer is the alternate. Fourth district, Peta V. Coffey, Margaret Gail Martin, M. Elizabeth Carino is the alternate. From the fifth district, Donald C. Dorr, Jean Marie Westlake, John McCann is the alternate. From the sixth district, Catherine Grant Madigan, Bruce McKeegan, Alyssa Barrero is the alternate. From the seventh district, Eileen E. Buholtz, Amy Schwartz Wallace, Kevin F. Ryan is the alternate. From the eighth district, Norman P. Effman, Sharon Stern Gersman, and Vincent E. Doyle III is the alternate. The ninth district, Claire J. Degnan, John A. Papalardo, the Honorable Jonah Tribsweiser, the Honorable Adam Seiden is the alternate. From the 10th district, Justin M. Block, Dorian Ronald Glover, Lynn D. Poster Zimmerman, Samford Strenger. Eileen S. Cooper is the first alternate. Stephen Leventhal is the second alternate. From the 11th district, Richard M. Gutierrez, Zenith Taylor, Arthur Terranova is the alternate. The 12th district, Hugh Campbell, Suzanne McElrath, and Stephen E. Millian is the alternate. From the 13th district, Jonathan B. Behrens and Sheila T. McGinn. Claire Cody Miller is the alternate. I move that a single unanimous ballot be cast by the secretary for the election of the district representatives on the nominating committee for the 2023-2024 term, plus alternate members.
Do I hear a second? Any discussion? All in favor? Any abstentions or opposition? So carried.
The New York State Bar Association has 11 delegates to the American Bar Association House of Delegates. Delegates serve 2-year terms beginning in August at the conclusion of the ABA annual meeting. 6 of these delegates, including the young lawyer delegate, are elected in even-numbered years. 5 of these delegates are elected in odd-numbered years. We will now elect the 5 delegates who will serve for the 2023 to 2025 term, beginning at the conclusion of the 2023 ABA annual meeting in August. On behalf of the nominating committee, I submit the following nominations for delegates to the ABA House of Delegates: Claire B. Goodekunst of Yonkers, Michael Miller of New York City, Scott M. Carson of Stony Brook, Sherry Levin Wallach of White Plains, and Domenick Napoletano of Brooklyn. Mr. Chairman, I move that a single unanimous ballot be cast by the Secretary for the election of the delegate nominees to the ABA House of Delegates.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Any opposition? Any abstentions? Passed.
Mr. Chairman, that completes my report.
Hank, thank you very much. And by the way, thank you for that wonderful article in the last Bar Journal. For anybody who's a little bit of a bar junkie, it was fabulous.
Greatly appreciated, Mr. Chairman.
The next item on our agenda is an informational report from the Task Force on Mental Health and Trauma Informed Representation, which was formed by President Levin Wallach in June of last year. The report will be presented by Task Force Co-Chair Joseph A. Glazer. This is a no vote item, and Mr. Glazer, I think, is coming.
Thank you. Good morning, all, and thank you for the opportunity to be here and present an interim report from the Task Force on Mental Health and Trauma-Informed Representation. I want to start by thanking President Shelley Levin Wallach, who has been such a strong supporter of these issues for such a period of time. One of the things that I work as the Deputy Commissioner of Mental Health in Westchester County. Sherry's office is literally right across the street from ours. It's an important proximity because we do an awful lot of work together. I'm amazed at how much Sherry has been able to accomplish in the past year and a half. Yesterday, I presented to the executive committee, left, ran to do some things up here, and at about 4 o'clock, my cell phone rang, and it was Sherry. And I thought she was calling to talk about what I had discussed yesterday, but it was a completely different topic. And that is that she had a situation in Westchester Legal Aid Society with a client and a worker, with the client being on the verge of mental health crisis and wanting to talk about who we might be able to possibly connect this person to. So in light of the fact that I'm pretty sure that Sherry has not yet been cloned, although I wouldn't rule that out, I am amazed at what she has been able to do to keep all of these things moving forward at the pace that she has. So just a moment of gratitude for Sherry. Onto the interim report. My co-chair, Sheila Shea, is out of the country. Some of you know her. She is the Director of Mental Health Legal Services here in this district. We started out really doing the legwork on this in August, where we began to put together meetings of myself, Sheila, and I would say at this point we're at 26 members of the task force from various different walks. And what we decided to do, one of our first 2 meetings, was we decided to create subcommittees because we had so many talented people that we were able to break up into a criminal justice subcommittee, a civil justice subcommittee, a seamless systems subcommittee, and a trauma-informed practice subcommittee. I'm not going to go too much into the criminal justice or civil justice because we all have a pretty good understanding of those pieces. But I want to talk about seamless systems. What do we mean as a bar association when we talk about seamless systems? For many of the clients that we serve, anywhere from healthcare to guardianship, if they are vulnerable individuals, they contact numerous points in our societal systems. Emergency departments, police departments, corrections, law enforcement, nonprofit programming, all of the above. We societally don't have a continuum that is seamless for them. The only part of the system that contacts every other part of the system right now is that individual. A seamless system, which is what we're pushing for, will help these individuals become more successful, and in the long run, that will give us, as practicing attorneys, the opportunity to serve them better. So although it sounds a little unusual for the Bar Association to be talking about and pushing towards the creation of a seamless system of care, much of the problem that we face every day is due to the absence of a seamless system of care. Trauma-informed practice was the other piece that I wanted to take a couple of minutes and talk about, because it's something that we all know is very important. Because as statistics tell us, 1 out of every 5 people is living with some diagnosable mental health or substance use need. For individuals who have one, there's at least a 50% chance that they are going to have both. So one of the big pieces we have talked about, and it was a presentation by Stephanie Marcasano of the Harris Project, has really driven us towards focusing on assisting people with co-occurring disorders. That is as much a seamless systems issue, because as we all know, government is nothing if not stratified. So if you have 2 needs and you're looking for sources coming out of state government to help you, you are now in a system that is literally built to not address your co-occurring need. From the trauma-informed side, we know that as practitioners, we're seeing it more and more every day. And while the bar has done amazing work for us as practitioners to help us meet our own needs, on the trauma-informed side, we really aren't as well versed as we could be in understanding what is going on with our clients. So I'm not going to go into a lot of recommendations. I'm just going to give you a little insight here. We are literally days away from filing our report. Because we are days away from filing our report, I can't give you a lot of detail as to what's in it because it hasn't been signed off on. My co-chair Sheila has done a wonderful job in quarterbacking this and helping to pull all of this together. She is in Japan right now, and we're trying to get this finalized, and we're trying to get it as well put together as we could before she left. But we're getting emails that say things like, I just want to go through the footnotes one more time, and please keep in mind that there is a 13-hour time difference. That's how close we are, so we're in pretty good shape, and I give her huge props for the fact that I would imagine the flight back from Japan, a lot of time will be spent on her computer cleaning this up and getting it ready to go. I also want to quickly express my thanks to Tom Richards and Kim McCarg, who without them, we would not have been able to do this as effectively as we have. Because what we did was we started back in August, alternating our regular meetings of the task force with informational meetings. We had, I believe, 10 of them, where we would invite individuals in leadership positions around the state to come and share information with us. So we had detailed information on psychiatric advance directives. We had detailed information, as I mentioned earlier, on co-occurring disorders. We had the commissioner of the Office of Mental Health and the executive deputy commissioner of the Office for People with Developmental Disabilities take an hour and a half out of their time to meet with us and go through a whole bunch of different things so that we had a better understanding, but we've also begun the process of connecting to the people who will help shape the next steps if and when this task force report is approved. There are a couple of things that I can say about the recommendations. There are pieces that we looked at, which historically the Bar Association in one fashion or another has supported. Things like the Treatment Not Jails Act, which we decided to include in the task force report and as a recommendation, simply because of the fact that if we didn't do it, it might give the impression that we no longer cared about that issue, and that's just not true. one of the other things that is coming out of this, in this report, is that if it makes it through the rest of the process, and we hope it does, one of the recommendations is going to be that the task force on mental health and trauma-informed representation become a permanent standing committee. I just wanted to put that out there because of the fact that Sherry has brought this issue to the forefront, and she has made it important. And it doesn't end when the task force report comes out. We'll need to keep going, and we'll need to keep working on it, and we'll need to partner with all of the many sections of the New York State Bar Association that can help move this agenda forward. So that is where we are. We're literally days away from submitting our draft of the report, and we're hoping to be able to have this report finalized and approved while Sherry is still the president of the New York State Bar Association. Thank you all.
Thanks very much for that report. It's an important area, and we appreciate your work. Next item is an informational report from the Task Force on the Modernization of Criminal Practice, which was formed by President Levin Wallach to suggest new laws and policies to improve safety, fairness, access to justice, and efficiency in the administration of criminal justice. The informational report will be presented by Task Force co-chairs Catherine Christian and Andy Kossover. Please note that there's no vote on this report.
Thank you. Okay, good morning. Andy and I will be a little tag team. First, we want to thank Tom Richards. Thank you, who has been an invaluable person. As I consider him as part of the task force. He's been we couldn't have done it without him, and Cara Dillum. And of course, we want to thank Sherry, who appointed us as the co-chairs last June. And we also want to thank all of our task force members. So this task force, am I supposed to be moving the PowerPoint? Next, just say next slide. In any event, so our mission statement, and we think we've fulfilled it, though it's not over yet. We're going to issue our complete report at the Cooperstown meeting, was to come up with laws and policies and recommend legislation that will improve the safety, the fairness, and access to justice in the criminal justice system in New York. Our focus was on state courts. Clearly, there's criminal justice issues in the federal system, but our focus was mainly on the state court. Next slide. We divided the task force into 3 subcommittees: sentencing, Talon Village, justice courts, and technology. And one of the great things, and I think Andy and I agree about this task force, it has practitioners. So you have public defenders, criminal defense attorneys in private practice, prosecutors, retired judges, current judges. So all of the stakeholders, all of the people who know what they're talking about, because they do it every day or they supervise. We have 2 elected DAs, the DA of Ulster County and the DA of Monroe County. We have members of the executive staff of district attorney's offices, the Bronx DA, the Queens DA, and the Westchester County DA. We have the highest level of public defenders in their particular county. So we were very proud to work with this great members of the criminal justice system in New York State. Our sentencing subcommittee is co-chaired by retired Judge Barry Kamens. He's not retired, I'm sorry, Barry. He's not retired as a practitioner, but he's retired as a judge. And Kate Cassidy, she's a partner at Marvillo Abramowitz, and her practice is primarily white-collar criminal defense. Our Town and Village Justice Courts Committee is co-chaired by Greg LeBeau, who's the former public defender of Greene County. He is now in private practice, and the district attorney of Monroe County, Sandra Dorley. Our technology subcommittee is co-chaired by the current president of the New York State Associations with Defense Attorneys, Youngmi Lee. She's also at Brooklyn Defender Service, and Ronald Hedges. These are recommendations that will be in the report. We're not going to go on about the substance of them. That will all be included in the report. We thought it was important for the House to know the recommendations that we intend to include in that report in June. Next slide. So our sentencing subcommittee came up with three, what we thought the most important recommendations in the area of sentencing. And what we tried to do with all subcommittees was not come up with pie in the sky recommendations. Most of these recommendations, of course, require funding, and we weren't going to say, well, we'll never get funding, so forget about it. No, we think it's important to have it in writing and to have this House, hopefully in June, approve and have it be the State Bar position that these are important recommendations, and it's important that the state fund the recommendations. So the first recommendation is what we would call a no-brainer, to allow defense attorneys to be present when their clients are being interviewed. This is after sentence, after they pled guilty, or after they have been found guilty at trial. They are interviewed typically by the probation department. And there's 62 counties, everyone does it differently. The pre-sentence report that results after the interview follows that client all the way with them to state prison, or if they were convicted of a misdemeanor, to a local correctional facility. It is not mandated, and in fact, in some counties, it is not even allowed for a defense attorney to be present when that client is being interviewed. You can imagine, just think about clients even in a non-criminal setting. You don't want your client interviewed about the substance matter of a case unless you're present. So as a former prosecutor, I remember reading pre-sentence reports, and I would say, Your Honor, the defendant who pled guilty and allocuted to it is now saying he's not guilty. So if a defense attorney was present during that period, that probably wouldn't have happened. Or saying some facts that, you've pled guilty and there may be some facts that you would not want now to have in writing that's now going to follow your client to state prison. So the federal system actually allows that. Upon the request of the defendant, the attorney must be allowed to be present for the pre-sentence interview. And so our recommendation is that New York State adopt the federal rule of criminal procedure that is relevant to that. The second recommendation is to allow judges to, we call it the second look legislation, to take a look at a sentence of a defendant who served 10 continuous years in state prison and see if that sentence should be modified in the interest of justice. It does not apply to A, B, and C felonies for you non-criminal practitioners. That's homicide, that's rape, that's kidnapping. Those are mainly the violent crimes. It'll apply to D and E felonies, which are still significant. Burglary in the third degree, which would be, a commercial burglary, grand larceny. So it will not apply, our recommendation does not apply to the most serious crimes in the penal law. The third recommendation is to allow for the elimination of mandatory minimum sentence requirements upon the consent of the prosecution and the court. And for those of you who don't know mandatory minimums, it's basically you're convicted of a crime and the judge has no discretion because the particular crime requires a mandatory minimum, no matter what the facts that came out, no matter what the defendant's background is. The sentencing subcommittee did look at indeterminate sentences. That is 1.5 to 3, 2.5 to 5.5, as opposed to a determinate sentence, which is just you're going to be sentenced to 5 years, you're going to be sentenced to 7 years. And that could have been 3 reports. And we have great legal minds who know sentencing like the back of the hand on that sentencing subcommittee. And their recommendation is to recommend that a commission be created that will address these issues and craft legislation related to indeterminate sentencing. So they're not punting As I said, in our time constraints, and also we want to make sure it's very thorough, any analysis that we do of indeterminate sentencing, and we thought it would be best to have those three recommendations be the ones that we're going to put out there and then recommend the commission for that. Next slide, please. Our technology subcommittee divided itself into subcommittees, one on discovery and one on e-filing. And this is the subcommittee where really funding is necessary. We've read the governor recently, there was funding that was allotted, and most of the funding in the criminal justice was allotted to law enforcement and prosecutors. And law enforcement and prosecutors should get funding, but also should the defense attorneys who are speaking of access to justice and fairness and equity. There was not funding that was on par with prosecutors. In fact, I think there was none that was really, some of it was cut. So our recommendation under technology is that funding by the state should be given to the prosecutors and the defense. In January of 2020, much needed changes were made to the discovery law. You can debate whether it went too far or not far enough. Fact is, changes were made that now require prosecutors to give over paperwork, and sometimes a massive amount of paperwork, in a very short time period. And who is getting that paperwork? The defense attorneys, who are now getting massive amount of paperwork in a very short time period. That takes staff, that takes resources, that takes, above and all, technology. Some of you are at firms. My firm has document management software, which makes it very easy if you have been provided with a large amount of discovery. So you can imagine at a government office like a prosecutor's office or a legal aid, a public defender, you're really going to get expensive, software. You're going to hire like a whole litigation support unit who will be working to do that. You could, if you had the funding. So our recommendation is, if we're going to have discovery, and as it should be given over early, not at the eve of trial. It should be staff that will be able to help the attorneys cull through it, organize it with software, and that's going to cost money. And the prosecution should get money, but also the defense should get money, because it is part of their job, obviously as lawyers on either side, to look through the discovery, but you can just imagine getting 2 boxes and having to go through that. We're also requesting or recommending that the state adopt a centralized repository for the e-discovery. We're also recommending that there are measures that are implemented to allow our clients who are incarcerated to have access to that. So your client who's not incarcerated, might be easy, come to your office. If you're incarcerated, you can't. And at present, there are clients who are incarcerated throughout this state who do not have access to that. Yes, of course, it costs funding. We're recommending that there be funding. We're also recommending there to be a permanent commission on discovery, because there continue to be debates about discovery, whether it went too far, not far enough, if there's going to be tweaks. There are going to be tweaks. People who are familiar with the issues, who are familiar with practicing attorneys on both sides, what they do, should be part of it and should be part of that commission. Next slide, please. E-filing. We know about that if you're in the federal system with PACERS. You know about that depending on your county. On the civil side, there should be a universal e-filing system throughout New York State. That's our recommendation. It'll make it easy. So if you are a practitioner who practices in multiple counties, I don't have to tell you that it's completely different depending on which county you practice in. New York City is different from Long Island. In fact, the Bronx is different from the Brooklyn. So Greene County is different from Tioga County, Franklin County. And the only reason why I know all these counties is because our task force is so diverse. We cover most of the state, so it's a very geographically diverse task force. The federal system, for you federal practitioners, you probably are like, you don't have that? No, we don't have PACER. We don't have what the federal system has. And we are recommending that New York State adopt that, or at least use it as a model. This is how you do it. And we appreciate that there's clearly much more paperwork and many more cases in the New York State courts than in the Eastern, Southern, Northern, or Western District. But still, it can be used as a model for New York State. Funding, 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 funding. This will require funding, and we have an assembly, a senate, and a governor. You know, they have seemed to, they can fund other things, they can fund criminal justice because it's important. If we argue and we talk about how important safety is, if we talk about how important a just trial is, it's going to require funding, and the focus should be on funding. Next slide. Town and village justice courts. There are two recommendations that this House has already adopted in previous reports. One is that we are recommending again in this report, and there'll be more substantive rationale for it, that the judges who are in the town and village courts be attorneys. That is not saying that the judges who are there who are not attorneys are not doing a good job. That is not what we're saying. We, as this House adopted many years ago, and as we will put in this report, we'll give reasons why it's important that they be attorneys. We're also recommending court consolidation. Yes, funding, funding, funding. But we think it is best for the county that there be a consolidation of the courts there. Also, in New York City, in the 5 DA's offices, when, and it's usually NYPD, when the police department make an arrest, the determination of which accusatory instrument or what charges will be filed in court are done by an assistant district attorney. That is not how it's done in many counties in New York State. So the problem with that, you know, from personal experience, you can have an officer who will give you facts and you'll say, where's the crime here? And then, you know, what we call it, we will decline to prosecute if you're a prosecutor, and then that person is released. If you don't have that lawyer's eyes, that prosecutor's eyes, and that case is just sent to court, in the justice courts, you can have the situation of someone being held for something that if an assistant district attorney looked at it, there wasn't probable cause, it wasn't really a crime because of the elements were not charged. So our recommendation will be that the accusatory instruments should be drafted by the DA's office. And we appreciate it again that, you know, the Franklin County DA's office does not have the same amount of assistant district attorneys as the Brooklyn DA's office. We appreciate that. But that's where funding goes to get more staff to do that. And now the tag team will go to my co-chair, Andy Kossover. And next slide, please.
Good morning. We're trying to keep our time constraints, so I am going to be very quick. I also want to thank Tom Richards, the Aaron Judge of the New York State Bar staff, done an amazing job for us, and the rest of the staff, Kayla and so on. And I also want to thank President Shelley Wallach for the honor and privilege of co-chairing with Catherine this very, very important task force, and I thank all of you for the opportunity to address you. In addition to those three big subject matters, we're going to recommend as a separate part of our report, we anticipate what we're calling, as you see on the slide, quick fixes. And that's because the people, as Catherine mentioned, that are on our task force are in the trenches on a daily basis. You know, we're in court every day, and we see some of the legislation that comes out of Albany understandably cannot anticipate every single nuance of new statutes, you know, of the implementation of the law. And so there are things that just don't make sense, like judges having to require an ignition interlock device installed in a vehicle, even though the defendant operator has no driving privileges during that period, or the car is not registered or titled at that time or not operational. So we want to give judges discretion to waive that kind of requirement. Also, cannabis, we haven't caught up with the marijuana recreational laws for people over 21 in terms of our vehicle and traffic law. Right now, the only charge available is DWAI drugs. So cannabis is categorized the same as more serious drugs. So we are going to recommend that there be a new lesser charge similar to DWAI alcohol is to DWI alcohol, lower BACs. Well, cannabis should also have something where, you know, a violation instead of a misdemeanor where you're driving under the influence of cannabis, something like that. So those are some quick examples of the quick fixes. Given time constraints, I'm going to defer over to the rest of your agenda, but I don't know if there's time for questions or not, but you'll ultimately get a resolution based on our final report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's a pretty exhaustive informational report, and there's a lot to talk about. It's run a little over, so we will, if you have questions or comments, it's still in process. Please contact the committee. We're going to switch the order a little bit, and we're going to go to the task force on notarization. There are two resolutions or two reports that are attached, and I'm sure that you've had a chance to look at them. This subject was as controversial a thing, not controversial amongst the attorneys, but a controversial issue that has arisen in years, to be honest with you. This resolution was approved on Thursday, these resolutions were approved on Thursday, March 2nd, 2023, at a meeting of the special meeting of the Executive Committee. And what we're asking for now is approval and ratification by this body. I was lucky enough to co-chair this with Ellen Makovsky, who hopefully is on. She's coming. And we had an amazing group. We were given this task, and I think we completed it in about a week and a half. So I will call on Ellen. Oh. I will call on Ellen to introduce our presenters and make a comment. Here she is.
Oh.
Good morning, Ellen.
Good morning. I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were so far ahead. You ready for me, I'm assuming?
Yes, please.
Good morning. We're here this morning to get the support of the House of Delegates for the reports of the Task Force on Notarization, which I hope you have in front of you. The task force was convened by President Wallach and President-elect Dick Lewis and I were named co-chairs of the task force, which was created in response to regulations promulgated by the New York Department of State in regard to new record-keeping requirements for notaries that NISBA membership believes is a redundant exercise that is going to create an undue burden on attorneys. Additionally, the task force has addressed the requirement that notaries providing electronic notarizations must choose a credential service provider to provide identity proofing, with the notary being responsible for determining that the credential service provider meets minimum technology requirements. There is additional legislation that the task force intends to review regarding notarizations in connection with the transfer of real property, as well as a new proposed federal statute concerning notarizations. We intend to review these issues at a future time and report back. The task force is comprised of 14 attorneys representing various sections within the bar. We had lively, in-depth discussions during our meetings, refining our positions. We produced 2 reports, which are primarily authored by Jamie Lewis, David Goldfarb, and Michael Markowitz. Jamie Lewis is going to walk you through the report on notary regulations, and Michael Markowitz will follow up with a report on remote online notarization credentialing regulations. It is our hope that the House of Delegates will approve the reports and that the association subsequently will work to modify the current statute and regulations. Jamie?
Good morning. Thanks for taking the time to consider this issue. I'll be brief because I feel like this issue is pretty clear and straightforward. To put it simply, the Department of State has overreached, exceeding its regulatory authority. And it's done so in a way that's not actually designed to meet its goal, yet creates significant challenges to attorneys practicing law in New York. The new regulations, which became effective in January, outline specific information which must be maintained for all notary acts. So all of us here today, this means us. According to the regulations, such information must be maintained for at least 10 years and must be capable of being produced as may be needed. Importantly, though, there's no statutory authority for these regulations as they relate specifically to in-person notarization. So where did the regulations come from? Well, last year, a process for electronic notarization passed the legislature. Included in that process were record-keeping and retention requirements for electronic notarization. The Department of State was then given implementing and regulatory authority over this electronic notarization process. At that point, the legislature could have extended this authority to all notary acts, but they didn't. And according to the principles of statutory construction, when one or more things of a class is expressly mentioned, others of the same class are excluded. Therefore, since the statute expressly provides for record-keeping and retention requirements for electronic notarization, it excludes such authority for in-person notarization. As further evidence of this lack of statutory authority, all we have to do is look to the legislature. The legislature has actually been considering similar record-keeping and retention requirements for the more limited purpose of residential property transfers, and has consistently rejected them every year since 2015. Now, we have no idea what the legislature will do this year, but certainly while the legislature is still debating, it's premature for the Department of State to act. So what's really going on here? Well, many communities are looking for ways to prevent deed fraud, which is a widespread and serious concern. But keeping a log noting dates, times, locations, documents, and identification for a decade, while absolutely burdensome to those of us just trying to follow the rules, it's really not an obstacle for those using false identification or those who are simply bad actors. Moreover, applying these rules to all notary acts, rather than targeting specifically those relating to deed transfers, is overly broad and unnecessary given the goal. That being said, if these regulations are not repealed, attorneys and our employees should be exempt. Well, why is that? Well, lawyers are already exempt from many of the notary requirements by virtue of being attorneys and what that involves. We are already subject to extensive fiduciary and ethical obligations with discipline and oversight built in, making the regulations duplicative and administratively burdensome for attorneys. This is especially true for rural attorneys with limited support and for legal services programs with limited budgets. Moreover, as attorneys, the requirement that our notary records be capable of being produced for others clearly implicates attorney-client confidentiality issues, as so many of us regularly notarize documents for our clients. It's for these reasons that the Task Force on Notarization respectfully requests that the House of Delegates adopt our report calling for the repeal of the Department of State record-keeping and retention requirements as they relate to in-person notarizations, or in the alternative, exempting attorneys and our employees from such requirements. Thank you so much for your attention and for your consideration of this issue.
Good morning. So, to understand the issue concerning remote online notarization, or RON, you have to understand what remote online notarization is. So I'm going to give you a 101 course on remote online notarization, and I promise within the next 2 minutes that I have, you will understand it. So we're going to use Domenick and Shelley as my guinea pigs. Okay, of course. So I am an electronic notary. Actually, in reality, I am an electronic notary. To become an electronic notary in New York, it's not a big deal. You go online, you fill out a form, you upload an oath, and boom, you're an electronic notary. So to electronically notarize something in New York, I have to be in New York. Domenick is a third-party provider, okay? And Shelley is in the Virgin Islands. Okay, we'll put her in Tortola, or the British Virgin Islands, which I know she loves, okay? Or she could be anywhere in the world, and arguably she could probably be on the International Space Station, okay? Anywhere. So this is how it works, okay? I have a document that needs to be electronically notarized. It's uploaded, and bang, it goes to Domenick, okay? Domenick is online with Shelley and myself. So we see each other. Domenick then turns around and he's responsible for doing two things, credentialing and identifying. Credentialing means that he has to have the ability to make sure that Shelley is Shelley. Okay, this is different than Zoom. We're all used to this Zoom thing, which by the way is now illegal. You can't do that anymore, where you see somebody on Zoom and you just stamp it, you know, he shows the thing online. It's no good anymore, don't do it. So Domenick, okay, has to have credentialing for Shelley. Shelley turns around and Shelley takes her identification, whatever it is, uploads it to Domenick. Domenick provides it through a service, and Domenick says, it's fine, it's kosher. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
As a provider, am I getting paid for this?
Yes. Guess who's paying for it? Me, of course. And guess what? I can't push it to my client. I can only charge my client $25 a notarization for electronic. But anyway, getting back to what I was saying before, so Domenick says, it's okay, fine, it's online. Shelley notarizes it, excuse me, Shelley signs it electronically. I notarize it electronically. Now we have a document that's electronically notarized. I then turn around in New York, print out the document, do a certification saying, this is good, and then give it to the county clerk, and the county clerk must accept it. And that's the law, under the executive law. Where's the problem? The problem is with Domenick, although not always a problem. We all love Domenick. But the problem is that to make sure that the certification and identification with Domenick is good, the onus is on me, a lawyer, a lowly lawyer. How am I supposed to know if Domenick is good? What we want to do is we want the Secretary of State to say, to license Domenick. So Domenick makes application to the Secretary of State saying, I'm a proper third-party provider. The Secretary of State says, yes, he is a proper third-party provider. I then turn around, I can go on the Secretary of State, find out who the third-party providers are, and I don't have to worry about Domenick identity, the credentialing and identifying, because I know that the Secretary of State has approved Domenick already. And that's where the problem is. Most, I should say almost, there are 35 states out there who do remote online notarization. We're actually one of the last to come into play, Most states have this type of licensing for third-party providers. So what we're asking is that the Secretary of State, instead of putting the onus on the notary, puts the onus on the third-party provider by licensing with the Secretary of State. Thank you.
So Michael, as a member of this House, would you like to move the reports?
Yes, I would so move.
Well, discussion. Is anyone ever going to do a notarization again? Is there any discussion for our virtual attendees? Pretty quiet.
I guess I was informative.
All right. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. It's passed.
Thank you.
By the way, we did receive a comment from the New York County lawyers who certainly supported this resolution or these reports. Our presenters for item number 10 are not here yet, so we're going to ask Steve Leventhal if he would come up and give his report in connection with local public sector lawyering. This is another task force that was formed by Sherry in June of last year, and Steve is going to give an informational report. There will not be a vote, and I think you'll find it informative. We heard it yesterday at the executive committee.
Thank you. In New York State, there are 62 counties, 61 cities, 933 towns, 534 incorporated villages, 800 school districts, plus special districts for water, sanitation, and fire. The latest statistics available from the state comptroller indicate that there are 4,135 local municipalities in the state of New York. They all have lawyers. Some of them have a single attorney. Some of them have a staff of attorneys. Municipal attorneys may be officers of the local municipality. They may be employees of the local municipality, or they may be independent contractors, and different ethical obligations attached depending upon which role the municipal attorney occupies. For most municipal attorneys, there are at least two intersecting universes of ethical obligations. The first are those that arise from the statutory and common law authority having to do with local government ethics. And the second, of course, are the rules of professional conduct. We have organized this task force with 3 subcommittees, and I'm just going to briefly tell you what some of the topics are that these 3 subcommittees will be looking at. The first is organized around the constellation of issues that arise from the identification of a client. Of course, Rule 1.13 is entitled Organization as Client, and the ultimate obligation of a municipal attorney, like the ultimate obligation of a corporate attorney, is to the organization. And there's a duty to advise constituent members of the organization of that fact if a conflict arises between the constituent and the organization. But identifying the client of a municipal lawyer is often very difficult. Sometimes the client is the municipality as a whole. Sometimes it's a branch of government or a board, commission, or committee. Sometimes it's an individual. And there's a line of cases involving criminal grand jury subpoenas coming out that came out of principally the DC circuit and other circuits that have held that the ultimate obligation of a municipal lawyer is to the public. So identifying the client of a municipal attorney, while it's sometimes difficult and complicated, is critically important because, as you all know, of course, the attorney-client privilege attaches only to communications between an attorney and a client. And if your client is a deliberative body, who may waive that privilege? And of course, as you know, Rule 1.6 of the Rules of Professional Conduct, which is entitled Confidential Information, is much broader in its scope than merely the information that may be privileged. An attorney is prohibited from disclosing information that a client asks you to keep confidential or that may be embarrassing to the client. What if information that you obtained in representing a deliberative body may be embarrassing to a single constituent member of that body? What if, well, there are so many permutations of these of the problems that arise out of the identification of a client. In a municipal context, when a municipality or a constituent of the municipality is represented by counsel, how does the no contact rule, Rule 4.2, apply? You know, that is the venerable rule that an attorney may not communicate with someone that the attorney knows is represented by counsel. But in the government context, there is a constitutional right under both the United States and New York constitutions to petition government. How do those principles interact? What if you have a recalcitrant public official as a client who refuses to follow your legal advice and what you believe to be the requirements of the law? What if the misconduct is criminal in nature? Do you have a duty to report the criminal misconduct of a municipal client? What if the board is divided, the members of the board are battling, or branches of government are battling? And one of the most difficult ethical situations for a municipal lawyer to find themselves in arises in connection with municipal elections. If you are a village attorney, the village clerk stands in the role of the Board of Elections for a village election. The village clerk is the chief election officer for a village. The village clerk's attorney is the municipal lawyer. The municipal lawyer's continued employment in that position may very well depend on who wins the election. And that creates certain ethical dilemmas, of course, for the municipal attorney. The second task force is organized around the conflicts of interest that arise from representation of various current clients. The compatibility of secondary employment. What if you are a private sector lawyer and you have other clients? What if your other clients have dealings with the municipality? May you represent a client before a board or commission or agency of the municipality that you represent if you do not represent that particular board, committee, or agency? When do these conflicts arise to the level of requiring disqualification rather than merely being cured by recusal? What are the ethical dilemmas that arise for a municipal lawyer who is also in the role of a lobbyist? And what do we mean by the appearance of impropriety? And that's an important question in government, because one of the primary goals of a government ethics program is to inspire public confidence by ensuring not only the reality of the integrity in government, but also the appearance of integrity. And finally, our third committee is organized around Rule 1.11, special conflicts of interest for former and current government officers and employees, which primarily deals with the ethical issues that arise for lawyers who transition between private sector and public sector employment. They involve the revolving door. Is there and should there be a cooling off period before a lawyer may appear before a municipal entity, board, commission, deliberative body that the lawyer represented? And how do you identify particular matters that were pending before a municipality that the lawyer represented and for which the lawyer is precluded from representing a private sector client? How do we define particular matter? Confidential government information, I've mentioned already. You know, in the public sector, we have developed this principle that openness and transparency are necessary for a democracy to function. In order for democracy to function, the voters must be able to hold their elected officials accountable, and in order to do that, they need to know what their government is doing. So for government generally, there is a presumption of access to information, but for lawyers, the presumption favors confidentiality. So there are tensions that exist there. The advice that lawyers give is sometimes legal advice, it's sometimes operational advice, it's sometimes political advice, it's sometimes the intermeddling advice that people just give one another. And of course, the attorney-client privilege attaches only to legal advice. Finally, client entertainment in the private sector is the norm. In fact, no lesser authority than the United States Congress, in enacting the Internal Revenue Code, authorized an income tax deduction for business entertainment. Do you know what you need to be in order to be tax deductible as a business expense? You need to be ordinary and necessary in the production of income for your business. So in the view of the United States Congress and the view of the Commissioner of Internal Revenue, client entertainment in the private sector is ordinary and necessary. If you take that that scenario and transpose it into a government setting, it may in fact be a crime. It may be the crime of giving or receiving an unlawful gratuity. And finally, the concept of pay to play was not incorporated in the rules of professional conduct. So to what extent is pay to play still an issue that we want to look at and examine? So those are the topics that we are reviewing. We have our subcommittees up and running. They're very active right now. And I yield the rest of my time to your family and friends.
Thank you, Steve. Are there any questions before he gets back to his seat? Great. So our next report is going to be with regard to the adoption of two resolutions that have been offered by the Task Force on Emerging Digital Finance and Currency. This report will be presented by Matt Feinberg virtually, right? Feinberg, I'm sorry. And we will have two votes on both resolutions. I'm going to suggest that the presentation be made with regard to both of them and our discussion be with regard to both of them. I also want to note that the Executive Committee heard these reports yesterday and unanimously approved both of them. So, Matt.
Thank you. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here It's my first time addressing the House, and it's really an honor to be here and discussing such important topics. So I'll start off by saying I'm a member of the New York State Bar Association's Task Force on Emerging Digital Finance and Currency, which was created in June of 2022 to study and evaluate legal issues and questions surrounding the expansion and regulation of the digital finance and digital currency industries in the state of New York. And the task force has three components: to develop and educate members on best practices for attorneys representing clients in the digital finance and digital currency areas, as well as to study and evaluate legal issues and questions surrounding the expansion and regulation of the digital finance and digital currency industries in the state of New York, and to promote the appropriate use of digital assets and Web3 resources to keep pace with the industry and expand global membership. And I'm proud to say that we have been effectively doing all three of those things, hitting the ground running, and things are going great. And I thought that it would be appropriate that we could share some slides and we can see a little bit, explain a little bit more about what we're doing. We have two resolutions pending. The first resolution pertains to the necessity to have a voice when it comes to legislation. There are New York politicians that have proposed bills in the Senate and the House respectively, as well as state officials, I believe, that have proposed legislation pending in the state bodies regarding these areas of the law. And it's imperative that the New York State Bar Association have a say in this. As being the industry leader when it comes to bar associations, we must have a say, certainly because the politicians and the regulators are looking to the state bar for guidance and to see, well, what do the attorneys feel? How do the attorneys feel about this? How do the practitioners feel about this? Just as they do for other legislation. So it's extremely important that we're able to have that voice and to be able to say the New York State Bar Association believes X, Y, and Z, whether it's for or against something. But to be able to have that voice is imperative so we can ensure consistency in terms of across the country and also still remain an industry leader. This is New York State. Obviously there's Wall Street here. This is the hub of all business activity, and it's also the hub of a lot of activity regarding digital finance and digital assets. So it's imperative that we continue going out there and leading the way when it comes to bar associations, because that's how we can have a say in future policy, which right now doesn't really exist. So this is a unique opportunity to capitalize on important legal issues. The next, I don't know if we want to go to the next slide, which is the second resolution. I don't have control of the slides. I apologize. So I'm at the mercy of somebody else right now. But I'd love. But I can talk about the second one. There we go. So the second resolution pertains to how we can engage membership and how we can use opportunities in Web3, which is like the normal internet that we're used to, but with a little bit more and a little bit independence, and everybody out there kind of able to do their own thing. How can we use the technology, the blockchain technology? How can we use all of that to benefit members and to bring upon new members? Because one of the things that I've been seeing is a tremendous amount of interest from law students and newer members of the bar inquiring about the task force and inquiring how can they be involved. And we've been hosting CLEs and other programs, and they are very engaged. And it's important that we're able to use the technology that's out there to support the membership and to support the bar. And there's various examples of this, and we'll go through some slides in a bit regarding some other examples, but there are ways to use digital art and digital assets to help members, from receiving an award, getting a digital version of it, which doesn't need a certificate of authenticity or anything like that. Nobody can copy it because it's on a ledger in a blockchain. It's there in code, so it will live there forever. There are also ways to incorporate attendance at certain events by giving them NFTs. And many of you may have, if you're Jets fans, may have had access to these NFTs, because the Jets for certain home games were giving away NFTs, non-fungible tokens, with their tickets. And in some cases, musicians are doing this and giving you extra perks that come along with that NFT, that digital collectible. So there are so many ways to use this tech to entice the bar. And I'm not sure who's in front of me and how many people have, but the women's suffrage exhibit, if we could get that on chain, that could live on chain forever, and we could blast that around and display it without having to have it sit kind of stationary. It's just another example of how we can really have great outreach and remain a leader when it comes to bar associations. So that's the second resolution. I don't know if, I guess, do I have to screen share my the slides? Or I don't know if anybody has the other ones. We put together some slides to get you to show you a little bit about what this stuff is, what this technology is.
If you could screen share, yeah, because those other slides didn't come through.
No problem. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see that. And what are NFTs? NFTs are non-fungible tokens. And before I get into that, I'd also like to thank David Steiner, who prepared these slides, and they're kind of a expedited, put together, condensed version of his slides, but they're excellent. He is also a task force member. So what are NFTs? NFTs are distributed digital ledgers that are created by code, smart contracts, which I'll briefly touch upon, associated with digital resources. And it's important to keep in mind that if you have any questions during any of this brief period where I'm speaking to you, please reach out to me. Please email me. This is a lot of information for 10 minutes. And if you have no knowledge of it, it can be overwhelming. So please just reach out to me. I will say the report that we have issued is very dense and contains great value. So if you won't have any questions, you might get some answers in there, but I'm more than happy to take questions after I'm done presenting today, because I know it could be a lot. So what are some examples of NFTs? They're digital assets that live on blockchains. Well, here's an example of one of them. This is art by Beeple. Beeple is an artist who sells a lot of his stuff as NFTs, one of which was purchased for $70 million. So this is clearly something that's happening. In addition to NFTs, I mentioned smart contracts. This is a whole topic in and of itself, which I could talk about for hours. But essentially, smart contracts are used on the blockchain to create events. But they're not really contracts at all. And this is more of what a smart contract looks like. It's code. Smart contracts can be part of contracts and can contain legal aspects, but for the most part, it was a mistake for them to use the term smart contract because it's not really a contract. And there's the slide, not contracts, really code, but may contain contractual terms. And it's oftentimes used as a condition precedent for an agreement where you can program a smart contract that way. You may enforce terms that way. Contractual terms. That is because smart contracts will operate as soon as something happens. So if something happens, if A happens, the result is going to be B automatically. It's permissionless. And what does it mean to own NFT? That's a great question. And one of the reasons why I think the task force is out there challenging and investigating, because there are intellectual property issues that we still don't really understand yet. There have been some cases. There was recently a case regarding Meta Birkins, but this is still an unsettled area, which is really why we need to be here and be in the forefront. Here's another example of an NFT and what you can do when you could put it on a phone. This is a CryptoPunk NFT, which is one of the original non-fungible tokens that came out. And here's another example. Now, just imagine what the women's suffrage exhibit could look like with this situation. And it does look like I'm frozen, so hopefully you could still hear me. But these are just some examples of what we can do, what we could do with the tech, and what we can do to help promote the Bar Association, gain membership, and also really be a leading voice when it comes to policy. Because like I mentioned, we are New York State. This is the State Bar Association, and our legislative leaders are going to look to us to provide guidance as to the laws. And I think we need to be there. And it does look like I'm frozen. Am I still able? Are you still hearing me? Yes. Okay, sorry, everybody.
Okay, so with that all having been said, there are two reports which we wish to pass on. And so I would entertain a motion for the first two resolutions. The first resolution. It's been moved and seconded. And the second resolution, so moved. Second, discussion. I'm sure there'll be some discussion. Sarah Gold.
Good morning. My name is Sarah Gold. I appear as a member at large from the Executive Committee. I move in support of these two resolutions, primarily because I know for a lot of people in this room, you may not have understood any of what was said, and that's okay. You know, you're here to learn. This is part of why the resolution is being made. You know, this is going to attach to every part of the practice, whether it's banking or corporate or states or intellectual property. It's coming, and we have to be ready for it. If we don't have the privilege to stay silent in these matters and expect to be relevant both now and in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Simeon, before you speak, Peter Kiernan has requested to speak via Zoom. Peter, are you there? Apparently not. Simeon. Oh, okay. Oh.
Should I wait for Peter?
Peter?
Can you hear me?
Can hear you now.
Sorry, well, thank you. I just wanted to speak very briefly to the issue of regulation. I believe it was 2015, the state, in what I considered an act of real arrogance, created what was called a bit license, which would require any cryptocurrency entity doing business in New York State to have a crypto license or a so-called bit license. And I represented at the time one of the largest cryptocurrency entities in the country, and we applied for a bit license and in fact were awarded the very first one ever given. But it was a very arduous process and a great expense created for the client. And when and we got the impression as we went along that the regulators were just making it all up as they went along, and I believe they were. In the final analysis, and I mentioned the state being arrogant, because when the state looked around thinking all other states were going to follow it, it was going to be the leader, no other state followed it. And all we did was create confusion. All the state did was create confusion, prevent most crypto companies, some of which became very significant entities, prevent them from dealing with New York banks or serving New York customers. And that also meant a lot of business for New York law firms was never happened. So my point is that the resolution is not clear to me whether it's calling for state regulation or federal regulation. I very much endorse federal regulation. I really think it's a mistake for the state to regulate here and create confusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Matt, can you respond to that? Okay. Apparently Matt's getting back on. We'll hopefully hear from him. Simeon.
For what it's worth, from my standpoint, in reading the second of the three first set of resolutions, where it calls for a reduction in inequities between the state's regulatory schemes, it seems that the idea is to avoid the kind of aberration that was just described. That's, for what it's worth, that's how I would read that resolution. So I stand in support.
And I think that's what came out yesterday.
That was my impression from it. So I stand in support of this. I think, if anything, we could go yet further in promoting the state bars taking on a leadership role in this zone. I have to say, for years now, I've been hearing these terms like, blockchain is a distributed ledger, or there's decentralized and transparent and immutable transactions happening. And basically what we've got is a new system where value, digital banking value, is placed in something Web3, the metaverse, blockchain, whatever it is. And what it means that I don't think we really, or I certainly didn't appreciate, is when you have something that's decentralized and you got a bunch of different machines that are running it without a particular head, that's a little scary. And I think of the Yeats poem, turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer, the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the earth. So for us as lawyers with the rule of law, even the scary side, that there's value being put out there that no centralized control is on, is something we want to look at. So absolutely, we should be looking at it. On the positive side, it's fantastic. And I love the idea of being able to give out NFTs as awards here. So I'm for both of those resolutions. I stand strongly in support.
Thank you, Simeon. Sherry, Matt is back. Matt, I don't know if you heard the comments by Mr. Kiernan. Were you on?
I apologize. I'm now on my phone. I was able to hear the tail end regarding some of that. I missed the beginning though.
Okay, so Mr. Kiernan's question, correct me if I'm wrong, is whether you're asking for federal or state regulations.
Well, I think we're still determining that, and I think that's part of the task force right now. Is figuring that out. And probably I would say both. And ideally, what we would love to see is uniformity, but we just don't have that. So I think working wherever we can now, whether it be at a federal level with our New York delegates, who we have members of, Senator Gillibrand has a bipartisan bill in the Senate for stable coins that stalled out a bit, but still she's obviously very involved. We have various members of the House that have penned legislation, Representative Richie Torres, Representative Johnson, I believe. There's a bunch of them. So I think it's both. But because we are New York, because this is New York, obviously state legislation is going to be important as well. We have the Attorney General here. We have the State Attorney General. We have the Martin Act. You know, we need to have state laws, in my opinion, and federal laws. Obviously, where they're not conflicting with each other, but I think it's important to study both because right now it's just very much unsettled.
Thank you, Matt. President Levin Wallach.
Hi, thank you. And obviously I stand in support of the motions on the floor and this report and the work of the task force. And what I'd like to add to this discussion is the importance of us having a voice in the discussion. This is being discussed every day in every area of practice. And so whether it's state or federal, we need to be in the room. We are being contacted and asked to be part of the discussion. The task force is made up of experts in the field. The members of the task force include individuals who represent banks, who represent corporations, who represent individuals, who represent artists, who create their own NFTs, and also regulate work with clients on their creation and transfer of NFTs. So we also have on the task force individuals who work for big firms, small firms, and just about every large firm out there. If you look at the material that was provided on the April conference, every large firm now has a crypto practice. And so for us, it's most important that we engage in this space. And on the side of what it can do for us, what it can do for our membership, the idea here is to use the technology to advance us, to make us relevant to those young lawyers and practitioners across the world that we keep talking about we want to be relevant to, because they're working in this space and they're engaging in this space every day. I believe it is something about 85% of all Gen X, and about 90+% of all Gen Z are what they call gamers. Doesn't mean they play games. It means they operate in the digital space in one way or another. So this is our future. And we have lots of opportunities within the material that we have in the Bar Association to share that material using this technology so we will all better understand it. And so I stand in support of these resolutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Hermes Fernandez.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Hermes Fernandez from the 3rd District. I just have two smaller points. One, and I think this kind of relates to things that have been said previously, and I'm not sure this is actually in order, but the report twice uses the term democratization in discussing this process. Otherwise, it talks about decentralization, and I think the appropriate term in all circumstances is decentralization in the report, not democratization. I would hope the task force would amend its report, accept this as a friendly amendment, to make those changes. It comes up twice. I think the same sentence is used twice in the report. The other thing I bring forward is in terms of the resolutions, which I think I generally support, I think this has been an excellent process, is I'm not sure that we need in the first resolution, and it would be the first resolved paragraph, that Bar Association supports prioritizing consumer and environmental protection while balancing and encouraging the growth. I don't know that we're up to a point to, at least for me personally, to encourage the growth of something that we really don't know where it's going. I think this simply said, while balancing the growth of well-regulated digital finance, I think that the resolution makes more sense in that circumstance. So I would offer that as I don't know if it's a friendly amendment, but I would offer that as an amendment to delete the words "and encouraging."
So Matt, there's a couple of slight changes that have been offered here. And the question is whether you would accept them as a friendly amendment on the first
Absolutely.
resolution.
Yes,
You would.
yes, I would.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. We have a question from on the virtual, from a virtual attendee, a strange name, Norman Effman. Norm?
Thank you, Chairman. What I was, I sit right now in favor of the report. I'm still trying to figure out what a certificate of deposit is, so that's where I stand. You know, and I'm a pre-Boomer generation, so it's a little bit difficult to really comprehend all of this. I'm just wondering, besides what you're recommending, which I support, whether you're looking into the use of Bitcoins and cryptocurrency within the profession, and whether that creates disciplinary issues with respect to whether you are, in fact, getting involved with your client if you accept Bitcoin as a retainer, as that thing fluctuates without real knowledge as to what its true value is at the time that the retainer is earned, and whether that will be something that we have to really focus on as clients are offering Bitcoins in exchange for representation.
Absolutely. I met with the committee regarding professional discipline regarding that very subject. I wrote an article regarding it and regarding the rules and you know, whether it's permissible to accept crypto and whether it's permissible to accept crypto as a form of advanced payment. And I had a great conversation with the committee about how those points are extremely important and need to be clarified. And, you know, the as far as I know, the committee on professional responsibility and professional discipline is looking into it. Because I think we do need guidance there. And I think that's very important, because my personal reading of it is if you're going to be accepting cryptocurrency as payment in advance as a retainer, you're basically doing business with a client, which is prohibited. There's an exception. It's I think it's 1/8. But yes, that's certainly an area that I'm fascinated with, and I think is very important. And there are other ethical issues that must be dealt with, because as we practice in this area, whether we like it or not, and whether we're for whether we practice it actively in the in the field, if you're, say, a trust and estates attorney or a matrimonial attorney, and you have nothing to do with any of this stuff, you're going to have clients that have stuff that the spouse had stuff. You want to find it. You want to know how much it's worth. Somebody passed away. This person's inheriting a bunch of digital assets. They come to you. They want to know what to do. So these are all very important issues that need to be tackled. And yes, and we are the New York State Bar Association, the leader, and we're out there leading the way. And I look forward to helping tackle those very questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Is there any further discussion with regard to the first resolution? first resolution has now been amended by friendly amendment to the first resolve clause to read, the New York State Bar Association supports prioritizing consumer and environmental protection while balancing the growth of well-regulated digital finance and related business within New York State, essentially eliminating and encouraging from that resolve clause. Secondly, the report has been amended by friendly amendment to eliminate the word democratization in 2 instances and to change it to decentralization. With those changes, the resolution has been moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. The second resolution, not yet. The second resolution has also been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion with regard to the second resolution? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? Passed. Now you can applaud.
Thank you, everybody. We appreciate your support, and I appreciate the hard work that you're all doing on this matter and other matters. So unless there's anything else needed from me, I'm going to skedaddle. And if anybody needs to reach out to me, please feel free to shoot me an email.
Thank you, Matt. The next item on our agenda we will come back to, and we will go to number 14, the report of the New York Bar Foundation. Carla will be speaking. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so happy to be able to still say morning. It's really great to see everyone in person today. This is my report to the House of our activities since the last time I reported in January. So first, I'd like to thank each of you, our fellows, the NYSBA sections, the people that we partner with. Thank you for your support for the work we do at the foundation. I'm happy to report that we had a very successful inaugural auction during the gala. Not only was it fun, but because of your generosity at the auction and during annual meeting week, we raised more than $100,000 to use for the grants that we make. Following the gala, we also had a very successful virtual annual meeting of the fellows where we honored Susan Lindenauer and Michael Getnick. I'd like to thank President Shelley Wallach for the opportunity for the foundation to participate in the gala this year. I'd like to thank the Honorable Cheryl Chambers for all her hard work putting together this auction. This partnership supports the foundation's efforts to raise the needed funds that help people throughout New York State who desperately need access to legal services and assistance. To that end, one of the most important activities since January was our annual review and allocation of our grant funds. At the January meeting of the Foundation's Board of Directors, we approved more than $600,000 in grant allocations, funding 95 programs spanning all of New York State. This year, every single judicial district received at least one grant. In addition to the organizations across New York State, the Foundation's grant making supported the good work of this Bar Association, funding several programs ranging from a mock trial program to attorney wellness. These grants are critically important. In addition to the support of the Bar Association, they fund programs related to access to services and education, elder law, domestic violence, racial equity,
veterans matters, and family stability. I'd like to share a story with you about how one of our grants helped a young woman from Buffalo. I think there's a slide to this. I don't know who's doing this. Aha, okay. Megan, a 16-year-old young woman, was referred to Buffalo's Family Justice Center. Oh, I see it, okay. Sorry, all this technology. Was referred to Buffalo's Family Justice Center. Her parents lost custody of her, and Megan lived with her grandmother. But that arrangement was no less abusive than the arrangement with her parents. Her grandmother allowed her father unsupervised visits, even though he still struggled with addiction and behaved erratically. Worse, she allowed Megan's uncle to have access to the home and access to her where he sexually abused Megan. When she told her grandmother about the abuse, the grandmother told her she was lying, and after she ran away, the police returned her to the grandmother's home. She was then connected to the Family Justice Center for assistance. With their help, they helped her file for and obtain a permanent order of protection to protect her from any further abuse. They also helped her address the issues that resulted from the abuse, how it affected her ability to live a normal teenage life. And then they did something really remarkable, which is the picture that you see here. Megan was not able to plan or even think about a prom. So the Family Justice Center put together a prom care package for her so that she could, in fact, participate in this teenage rite of passage despite all she'd been through, to help bring a little bit of normality to her life. The work of the foundation makes a difference to the lives of so many. Here's how you can help. Can I have the next slide, please? If you've been nominated as a fellow, please consider and accept this distinguished honor. If you're currently a fellow, think about moving to the next circle of giving. Consider the foundation's Legacy Society, or consider establishing a fund in your name or in honor of someone. You could donate by using the QR code that you can see up at the screen. I would like to end my remarks with sharing some very amazing news. Could I have the next slide? Next slide. I'm pleased to announce that during today's board meeting, the foundation will ratify the establishment of a new restricted fund. Many of you may know Professor Merrill Sobey of Pace Law School. Professor Sobey specializes in family and children's law. He teaches jurisprudence, children in the law, advanced family law, and comparative family law. He has authored 2 books, New York Family Court Practice and the Creation of Juvenile Justice, A History of Children's Law, and has published the official McKinney's commentaries to the Family Court Act and Domestic Relations Law. Because of his passion for improving the justice system for children, he has presented the foundation with a $100,000 gift to establish the Merrill and Hope Sobey Fund. The fund is for the purpose of improving the justice system for children, advancing law or policies that affect children and their families through empirical study, research, the delivery of legal service, and other methods that advance justice for children through our grant program. We are extremely grateful for the generosity of Professor Sobey and the impact that this will have on our grant program now and in the future. It's been a great start to this year. Thank you all for working with the foundation to advance justice and address the needs of our legal system and our community. And one final note, thank you to everyone who contributed to our donor wall. As you can see, it's up, it's beautiful. Please take a look at it on your way out today. And again, thank you so much. Everybody have a great day.
Thanks. Thank you very much for the report. We're all very interested in the success of the foundation. The next report is what I think is, if not the most important, one of the most important reports that we'll get. It has to do with membership. And I know that Michelle Grube, Will Grube. Is that, am I close? Yeah. All right, I've only known you for about, I still don't know how to do it. And she will give a report, which we should pay pretty close attention to.
Good morning. How nice that you're running early today. When I'm the last thing between you and lunch, possibly? All right, so I'm here to talk about membership, and I know I'm talking to people who also believe in membership, but I think it's important for me to get the information to you to bring out to your people and hopefully encourage more people to join NYSBA. So today my report is really about stats and surveys. So we survey people who leave, and we survey our current membership to determine what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, and what we need to do. So I've got some slides, and here we go. All right, so the good news is that we are doing pretty well between 2022 and 2023 with regard to membership, that we've only seen a slight decrease, and we have a good amount of time to make up this decline. While we're always concerned about the decline, we are constantly working to encourage membership and to maintain and retain our members. The other thing to know, though, I'm going to say as we talk about decline, is that our membership is actually only 15% of attorneys admitted in New York. 15%, that's not an April Fool's joke. So that means that we have a really well-stocked pond of fish within which we can catch new members. So 85% of people licensed to practice law in the state of New York are not members of our association. And so all of us need to be aware of what we can do to invite our colleagues to join and to increase membership. And we see that as a great goal. We see that as a great opportunity. So Clotelle's going to talk about why members are leaving. In response to, good morning, everyone. Clotelle Drakeford, you didn't get, I think, introduced. So let me introduce you to my co-chair, Clotelle.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and happy Saturday. In response to the surveys that were conveyed or relayed in 2021 and 2022, we got some really good feedback, and there were 3 top reasons that attorneys indicated that they were no longer going to remain members of the New York State Bar Association. The first was they were simply no longer practicing. So we're talking retirement, we're talking lifestyle changes. The pandemic obviously impacted people in different ways. There were also financial constraints that were relayed. So with respect to the no longer practicing response, 14% in 2021 indicated that they simply were no longer going to practice law, and that increased to 26% in 2022, which we find does have an impact with respect to our baby boomer demographic. As it relates to financial constraints, that was the leading reason in 2021, with 33% of the respondents stating that that was their primary reason. We anticipate that this is still pandemic-based and related in terms of repercussions of the pandemic. In 2022, that has decreased to 19%, and respondents are stating that, the waiver program for dues is certainly a concern that people are not aware of that. With respect to the third top reason, the response was people disagreed with the organization's political and social views. In 2021, approximately 24% of respondents stated that they were dropping their NYSBA membership based on disagreement with stances that NYSBA has taken when it comes to political and social viewpoints. During the 22 survey, that number decreased slightly to 14%. However, this is still a concern, and what I pointed out in yesterday's meeting to the executive committee, in my personal opinion, this question actually should be framed as taking a position with respect to NYSBA's political, not political, but actual policy stances. In my view, this question was not framed in a way that would engender a response that is not accurate, actually, with respect to whether we're taking political or social views and positions. Absolutely. So giving the specificity in terms of what members were stating in response to the survey as it relates to the disagreement for political views, the association has moved away from supporting the rule of law and the interests of New York lawyers. It is spending too much time on partisan political agendas, quote unquote. It has been a tough year financially, and I forgot to renew. I also disagreed with some of your views. I do not feel it is ethical to choose a political side as the NYSBA has done. Another one, the association supported too many liberal positions which diminish the support for our laws. Secondly, the dues for membership do not offer adequate comp for the cost of CLEs and books. With respect to not practicing, there are still interesting programs, but it doesn't make sense economically to renew after retirement. And then another with respect to does not make sense financially. I work for a not-for-profit legal services organization. The CLE programs offered by NYSBA tend to be much more expensive than other organizations. Although appreciative of membership, I cannot afford almost $300 for services rarely used. In addition, other bar associations, have lower membership fees for similar benefits. And one other that I would point out that members noted, that there's a complicated dues structure that we need to address. I paid $250 for memberships to the New York State Trial Lawyers Academy, and all CLEs are free of charge. Why would I spend any money on the NYSBA CLEs?
So as you can see, we have some things to work on and to look at and to consider. The good news is, I would say, more people are likely to complain than to say the positive, and we do have a lot of positive here. So why are members staying? Members are staying because more than 62% of members are pleased with their membership. They know what we know, right? NYSBA is the place to be. 73% of the respondents found their membership in sections to be valuable, to be very valuable. So that's also great. We know the sections are the lifeblood of our association. 59% of the respondents believe the dues pricing is fair and competitive based on what they receive, and 88% of our members responded that they are satisfied. So there are definitely positives. Just for some positive comments here, it's interesting that the surveys go out to the group of people and you get both sides of every coin here. So thank you for being a voice for the rule of law and respect for justice, rather than simply a voice for the wealthy and well-connected. Also, another quote, I support the issues on which NYSBA has elected to take positions. While they may be viewed by some as political, they are usually, if not always, directly related to the rule of law. For example, Ukraine, to the integrity of the profession, for example, Giuliani, and to the legal issues of current importance, for example, the legal justification for vaccine mandates. Another quote, it's important for NYSBA to continue to take stances on policy issues. And then finally, I usually agree. However, I don't see any opportunity for members to provide feedback before the association takes a stand. So maybe there's different ways that we can look at how we take positions. But we are just the membership committee. So we just wanted to report to you on what we are hearing. So these are the reasons that members are staying. And we also want you to know that NYSBA strives to have members be more than satisfied. We want them to be excited about their membership. We want to wow them with the membership opportunities that they have and with what we offer as an association. And so on that note, we're going to talk about CLE.
I'm happy to report that we continue to do very well in terms of our CLE programming, as this slide reflects. In 2019, pre-COVID pandemic, we offered 295 programs with 11,187 registrants. In 2020, we see that obviously spiked. We were all on lockdown or at home working remotely. So we had 415 programs with 28,540 registrants. In 2021, we saw still us all being impacted by the pandemic, 386 programs with a total of 30,846 registrants. And here in 2022, last year, there were 261 programs with 16,253 participants. As the numbers reflect, 74% of the respondents to the survey indicated that they prefer a virtual programming. So this is something that we obviously have to embrace. We understand that COVID's not going away, and we also have to embrace the fact that folks want the opportunity and the ability to either appear in person or have the option to participate in our programming remotely. In 2021 alone, we saw an increase in attorney registrations of almost 200% from pre-pandemic numbers, and that only reflected an approximate 30% in overall program offerings. We know that virtual programming has changed the game and made attendance for participants far easier. So we really do need to embrace it and figure out the technology that's needed in support of section programming and other related events.
I think I'd also like to point out that yesterday at the executive committee, our president pointed out that we have had less programs but more registrants, which is some amazing momentum there. So I think that's a really important stat to take note of. Great.
The other thing that I think we may want to consider in terms of a position for members, if a member lives more than a number of miles away from the event where we are encouraging in-person attendance, that be kind of the way to encourage folks to come, but offer that option for a hybrid scenario, especially for our members who are out of state.
So our survey takeaways would be that our areas to improve would be to improve maybe our complicated dues structure. While we do perform well, we know there are some challenges, and our complicated dues structure creates layered costs, a lot of add-ons, right? You have to plus up your membership in various ways. You join NSBA, then you have to join sections, then you have to pay for CLEs, and then you have to pay for publications. We think that this is financially prohibitive to some attorneys and can be problematic during the join and renew process for people who are just trying to make a purchase. So we really want to look at that from membership to see what can be done there. Also, we have system challenges. Technology can be challenging some ways and sometimes based on the information that we have to track and store membership stores and membership organization with decades of data. It's problematic from the membership side, but it's also problematic from the other side of the computer for the people who are registering for programs. We've heard that people have a difficult time trying to register for programs and major programs such as the annual meeting, that unfortunately our website can be clunky at times and that it's hard for people to use. We want to make it easy. You know, we want people to be able to click, register, and go. So we're hoping to work on that. The last thing that we need to improve on are greater awareness of benefits. Now, in this case, you know, I'm sure many in the room are aware of the great benefits that we offer, but people who are signing up, people who are newer to the association, might not realize the opportunities that we have for discounts for life insurance, for access to computer programs and software and things that can be used. And all of the other great things that we have. We have great partnerships, we have great opportunities for networking, and sometimes people join and then don't check in again. So we're hoping that we can get people to check in again and know everything that we have to offer to enjoy NSBA the way that we all do.
Typically, we know during the annual meeting, we see our sponsors and our benefit providers, our service providers present, but we also wish to see that more throughout the year and throughout programming so that members are aware if they're sponsoring things or they're simply there to provide information that these services and benefits are available. So we can do a better job in making the ask to have folks like USI Affinity or what have you be more prominent at our programming and events.
The other thing that we'd stress is that we see this as membership is a team effort. It's the task forces, it's the sections, it's the committees. We are all one organization and we are a collaborative effort. And it's important for all of us to sustain the Bar Association, to continue to attract new members, and for all of us to reach out to our colleagues who are not members and encourage them to join, to tell them what a great organization this is, to be one of the people who is saying all of the good stuff to overshadow, unfortunately, the negatives. So, but, you know, we're here talking to people who we know are the cheerleaders for our association. So I want to thank you for being here and for continuing to promote membership. Any questions?
Are there any questions with regard to membership? Thanks very much. One of the most incredible things that was said was the information on continuing legal education during the pandemic. And Kathy Sahutsky is here, and she and her CLE staff just did an incredible job. And she is absolutely invaluable. And there she is. We're down to administrative items. We have 4 administrative items today, 2 of which are going to require House action. The first item is to approve the designation of delegates filed by the county and local bar association for the coming year, the year 2023, 2024. Do I have a motion to approve? Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Great. The second issue is, administrative item, is to approve the filed roster of House members for the 2023-2024 association year. Do I have a motion? Is there a second? Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Now, the third is a little different. We had an elected delegate, Alan Crawford, who was from the 13th Judicial District, resigned from the House of Delegates in March. The Vice President and the remaining elected delegates from the 13th District have nominated Ellen Soren to fill the vacancy. What we need now is a majority vote from the elected delegates only who are in attendance. So if you are not an elected delegate, don't vote. So amongst the elected delegates, all in favor of electing Ellen Soren as a replacement for Alan Crawford in the 13th, please say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Are you all elected delegates? Are there any opposed? Carried. The last administrative item is an opportunity for me to ask Domenick to come to the podium. And this is my last House meeting, and I have to tell you, it's really been a pleasure. It's been, we've had moments of excitement, and all of this was promised to me by Vinnie Doyle, who told me that there would be these moments. But in any event, I have to say before I hand the gavel to Dom is that there's been so much help. Pam is up there, and she's incredible. David Miranda's up there, the entire staff. When I see Tom Richards here, these people, I talk to these people every day. And just to be a little informal, I can be sort of a pain in the ass. So they've had to put up with me, and I appreciate the fact that they did. In addition to that, working with Sherry and Taya and Domenick has been a real pleasure. And Domenick is now the president-elect designee, and congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
And I turn this over to you.
There isn't a last video. See, I don't go away without doing at least one more video. There was some sound to this, but we cut it out because it was not exactly what I wanted. But what Clint Eastwood, first of all, we couldn't find someone that actually looked like me. What I was told is that the best view would be Clint Eastwood. I don't know if that's true, but in any event, what he says in that skit is that there is a new sheriff in town. So with that, may I please have a motion to adjourn? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Are you sure? We'll go on forever. See everyone in Cooperstown. The meeting is adjourned. Domenick.